Hello, welcome back to another video. Today we are doing the patch 25.9 notes and tier list. We're kind of doing both in one. I wanted to do like an early tier list preview, kind of give my thoughts on the overall patch as a whole, and then I'll do more in-depth ones throughout the week, and then talk about some of the changes and how I feel they have landed when it kind of comes to them. So let's get into it. To begin with, the patch was pretty small. Outside of the summon at risk changes, we saw a couple of system changes, and then only 4 nerfs and 7 buffs. These champions are either, for the most part, solo queue skewed. The likes of Neferi, I mean, in Neferi's case, she's both solo queue and competitively skewed. In the case of Yorick, it's just low elo skewed for the most part. Callista is almost entirely elite skewed nerfs, and then Gwen is just overperforming across most brackets of play. In the case of the buffs, they over nerfed Annie in the previous patch. Ashe is being buffed as kind of like compensation for unflinching being buffed. Cassante has been underperforming for a while. Since the removal of lane swaps, they've had to, I mean, Cassante's presence in competitive has gone down quite substantially. Gives him some room to be buffed for both solo queue and for competitive. In the case of Leona, it's mostly quality of life buffs here. She was a pretty okay support as was. Morgana is a champion which only really sees its play within low elo at the moment. The buffs are primarily early game skewed, which should help her in higher brackets of play where the early game matters more. Orianna is receiving a mana change to her Q. It's now rather going from 30 to 50. It is now 35 flat, which is not hugely impactful. It matters more if you put points in Q, but most Oriannas alternate between Q and W, or just go like 3 points W into Q max. There's different ways of looking at it. I think it will stay relatively neutral. And then Shen is receiving a damage buff on the empowered Q. It's nice for a champion which is already in an okay spot. I don't think it'll be OP, but it will definitely be really good as a counter pick option and a champion I really recommend playing. Let's get into it. So we've obviously got the new Summoner's Rift map. Looks really nice. It's a good jump from the like dull red theme of Noxus. We've got the new battle pass, which is all very nice. The new Atakan is, well, there's only going to be a single Atakan. They are getting rid of the revive Atakan just for the petal Atakan, which is now being called Formbound. The rewards are cleansed bloody petals, which grant 25% XP and adaptive force, kind of similar to what we already got. And on takedown, it will best for the area around the target, slowing and damaging any other nearby enemies, as well as granting your team a spirit petal. It's quite nice. Bounties, once again, they're doing more changes to bounties. I feel like bounties get changed like every other patch for the most part. It's I mean, they are, I don't even know what the goal of this one is. We're adjusting the bounties to this season to make them more make them a more useful comeback mechanism. So I guess you just get more gold if you are far behind. They are now more powerful for the losing team. Yeah, okay. So I don't know what to think. It could be a case of just feels when it comes to these kind of things, because yeah, they change bounties consistently. In the case of the Void Epic monsters, there were some pretty impactful ones here. Grubs now only spawns once, and they spawn at 8 minutes. So when it comes to playing for objectives, you are now primarily going to be playing for that first streak, which can matter a lot in competitive and high elo. No longer having to play for a first Grubs definitely changes maybe some of the champions you want to be playing, and some of the stronger options up in the top lane. The rewards now grants Hunger of the Void, single Void Might buff when you kill 3 Grubs rather than 4. Now grants feats credit to whichever team took 2 out of 3 Grubs rather than requiring 3 out of 3. Broadcast when the encounter is over. Damage from Touch for Void now deals more damage at stacks 2 and 3. Okay. In the case of Rift Herald, it is, yeah, I think it's fast. Yeah, so now spawns at 15 minutes. Removed Herald's Gaze, so that was for damage debuff. The target's current HP bonus damage is going from 4% to 20%. And the swipe attack AD ratio is going from 3 to 1.25. Fixed on champions attacks, reducing the eyeball cooldown. And then some summoned pet changes. I believe this is something to do with, oh, this is like driving Herald, Shelly, I believe. Based turret charge damage increase, but turret charge damage goes down for each tower it hit. Driving turn speed should be smoother and more responses, especially early in the driving sequence. This is nice, good for players who haven't really understood. I mean, the way I usually drive Herald is I'll usually spam click in the direction I want to go, and it'll most of the time just kind of go in that direction, whereas sometimes you'll see people who hop in, maybe they only click once, but then it like instantly crashes into the wall. That can be something which happens. When driving, if you crash near an enemy turret without hitting it, the Rift Herald will attempt to perform the non-driven turret charge attack if available. position binding and world swapping. This is something that they wanted to implement to deny like force there to only be one jungler or one support on the team, I believe. So also trying to like change the way lane swaps detection works. It's yeah, I mean, I can quickly read through it. Lane swap detection, detection is still required, still requires there to be a jungler on the team. Detection is still active from 1:30 to 3 and 3 minutes in top, and 1:30 to 2:15 in mid. Defending champions still receive all gold, and XP from the lane receives 50% less damage while under the tower in top lane, and the defending tower still receives 95% less damage while any two non-junglers are in lane. It's just follow changes. The mostly just affects competitive. Shouldn't do a huge amount for solo queue. Player behavior updates, Summoners Rift Season 2 changes, and then Champions, so this is one I get on to. So Annie is, well, they over nerfed last patch, they took a lot of power from Tibbers, and they are following this up by trying to push more power into her base kit, rather than giving Tibbers some of the power back which he's lost. The Q damage is going to go from 70 to 210 to 80 to 240. This is meaningful, this helps her last hitting, this helps her burst, this helps her trading. I think this is a really big change. It's her first max ability as well. The W going down 20 mana cost as well is also really huge. Once again, another spell which really can help her wave clear quite a bit. Maybe you put points in this ability. I don't really know in its current state, but was cases like back on where you would do that. And yeah, the magic penetration is going from 10 to 15% to 15 to 20%. You're getting access to another 5 magic penetration early onto the game. And I think these changes are meaningful. She has a long way to go. I think she really did suffer quite heavily from her changes last patch. I don't think she will suddenly be OP. I think this, I have the mid lane one. Actually, I'll talk about these after. I'll do these after. But yeah, I think the changes should push her from like a D tier champion, which I had her in before, to something like maybe an A tier, maybe S tier if the changes end up being really, really heavy. I'd be interested to see, but I do think this champion will definitely be worth playing again. She is obviously receiving a very sizable buff here. Ashe. This change is obviously something, something to do. This is going to be part of the fact that I think Ashe is slightly weak at the moment, and they're also that buffing and finishing this patch, which is directly going to affect Ashe if loads of supports opt into it, maybe even some AD carries. Don't really know if it'll end up being cracked yet. It'll be interesting to see long term. But Ashe is going to have her AD ratio on Q going from 111 to 135 to 110 to 140%. And the bonus attack speed is going to go from 25 to 65 to 25 to 75. Really helps her 7 through 13. This like enables her to gain a lot of power in the mid game. It's definitely a change which Ashe will really benefit from. I do think Ashe is already a solid option, and I think this will just definitely solidify her as a like an S tier, like maybe even a high S tier pick at the moment. Gwen is going to be receiving another nerf. I think the rework, in my opinion, is a bit of a failure. I really don't like how they've gone with the champion. I think the intention with the changes was to try and make her better for like the average player and not as much of a scaling hard to play monster. Instead, what this has done is she's still a scaling champion, she's still elite skewed, she's still going to be weak for the average player for the most part, and or like when she gets to like a balanced state, and I think she now becomes a pretty competitively skewed champion as well. I don't like the way they've gone with it. I think it was a mistake. I would have liked to have, I just think they probably should revert and go for like a different set of changes if they want to make her less like elite bound. The armor growth is going from 5.2 to 4.9. This isn't huge. It will hurt her in some AD matchups in the top lane throughout like the later levels, especially on like a side lane. The passive is going to have its monster damage cap reduced from 5 to 15% to 5 to 10% AP ratio. This will also be meaningful. You are going to do less damage to monsters. You are going to clear slower. And the Q snip damage is going to go from 10 to 30 with a 5% AP ratio to 10 to 30 with a 2% AP ratio. This really hurts her ability to just lunge forward and just like get the snip and maybe not even look for the maximum snip. So getting that like center with the max damage, like getting the full value of it, is going to be a lot more meaningful, as her chip damage is going to be going down pretty substantially. So Gwen going to be considerably weaker, especially later on into the game. I think these are definitely going to be late game skewed nerfs. Her lane is still going to be pretty strong. It's still going to hurt, but like after first back, she's just going to have lost some power. Some champions will just straight up be able to survive and trade back against her now. So Gwen, I wouldn't really recommend playing this champion anymore for like the average player, but if you are like Master Plus, you still probably want to be playing Gwen or having Gwen within your arsenal of champions, because I still think she'll be pretty solid around that elo bracket. But yeah, for the average player, probably just not going to perform as well as some of the other options, which like are higher up on the top lane tier list at the moment. Cassante is going to have his W base damage go from 40 to 120 to 45 to 165. It's really small. I mean, the 5 damage early is meaningful. Like, this will be, I say meaningful, it'll be nice. If anything, it'll help when you just W through the wave, or you're just getting, like, some chip damage with W. How would I describe this? I mean, you're not going to suddenly start maxing W second, I don't believe. I still think you'll probably max E. I mean, there might be arguments where you can max W second, like maybe the damage in all out is nice enough that you can opt into it. But I think E max is already a really nice way of going second, and I still think this champion is going to struggle for the average player. Would I suddenly recommend playing Cassante? Probably not. He's probably still remains as like a C tier option for me. I'm not really going to, outside of like elite and competitive, he really probably is just not that recommendable, even when he is like in a slightly stronger state. Callista is going to be losing 20 base health, 2 base AD. The AD growth is going to go from 3.25 to 4, and the E rend damage is going to go from 10 to 50 to 5 to 45. I think Callista is basically dead as an ADC option now. I think this really hurts her. Like, her biggest strength was her early game, and they are taking a pretty hefty chunk out of it. The problem with Callista is she's a balanced nightmare at the moment. She is probably the most competitively skewed champion in the game in her current state. And the issue with trying to balance her is, unless they basically turn her into a late game champion, I don't really see her ever being like viable in solo queue whilst not already kind of taking over competitive. Or if they end up doing like late game skewed buffs, there's also the concern that she would end up being too top lane skewed. So definitely, I think there's a work to be done with this champion at the moment. I think she'll definitely be weak going into next patch. I already don't recommend Callista because she's a very hard to pilot champion, and she's only really performant in elite and competitive. And with these changes, I just in general don't really recommend Callista as an option now. Leona is receiving a good quality of life change. Her passive is going to go from 1.5 to 2.5 seconds. Really nice to see that. I'm glad they're making that kind of change. But mana cost also going down on her abilities. These don't really matter a huge amount. Maybe you get access to like 1 or 2 more E's in lane, and you can fish for picks a bit more frequently. It should be a win rate mover. I imagine like 0.3 to 0.5 kind of win rate would be gained off of this. She didn't really need it in the first place, so it's nice to see that they just went like the quality of life route. So people are like reminded that like Leona exists as a champion. Morgana is receiving a nice 20 flat shielding at all ranks on the E. This is going to be nice in for like having the shield not break if taking magic damage. It enables her to obviously have that CC immunity, so that is important. So the shield being up slightly is pretty big here, especially if you're against a champion with maybe only 1 magic damage ability in their kit and they rely on that to kind of break the shield. The R change is also really nice. 25 damage at all ranks on this ability, and 10 to 0% more movement speed on the R is going to enable her to catch targets more consistently, especially early on into the game, and really hurt champion's ability to kind of like walk out. So I think Morgana isn't terrible in low elo. Like, she's still a fine champion around that elo bracket. But this kind of buff is definitely going to be more elite skewed. If anything, it's like loads of base values, so or like early game damage, and it doesn't like, I mean, this one doesn't scale obviously, and this one is going to scale, but like 25 damage is more meaningful than 25 damage. 25 damage early is more meaningful than 25 damage late. Same goes for the shielding. I think Morgana will probably be like an A tier mid to low elo support. Still don't know if this is enough in high elo. Morgana mid is already an okay, I mean, I say already an okay pick. She's like a CB tier pick at the moment. Like, she's playable, and Morgana jungle is also kind of like a DC tier pick. She's like playable, but like still not great. I think this will like slightly bump her up in most of her roles, probably like a tier. So Morgana, better option now. Still think she needs a bit more to really kind of like solidify her as a good option in like all of her roles. Neferi is going to be have the cooldown of W go from 22 to 18 to 26 to 18. 4 seconds on that ability early when you max it late is going to be meaningful. It's now going to be a one cast wonder in the fights. You're not going to really be able to cycle this around again. The E is also losing 10% bonus AD ratio. This wasn't in the like preview. This is a straight up like new change being added to the patch. They probably saw this and thought this is not enough. We need to go a bit harder on her damage, and yeah, this is going to meaningfully hurt her clear, meaningfully hurt her ability to execute and then recast ultimate. So she's going to be down slightly. I think she's still a fine option though, especially if you're very comfortable on the pick. The Orianna change is, I don't think it matters that much. If anything, I think that she would just stay relatively neutral. Shen is receiving the 1% bonus damage on the EMP of the Q. This is meaningful for matchups he already wins and where you can consistently drag the blade through them, and in some of the rougher matchups where you can just E forward and then Q and like get a bit more damage through that. This is also going to help. I don't think this is suddenly going to make Shen OP. I think he's already really good in the counterpick matchups, and he is going to continue to already be really good in the counterpick matchups. I think if you want to blind, I wouldn't recommend blinding Shen. I recommend just using him as a counterpick, but yeah, he's definitely better now. It sits as a pretty solid A tier option with these changes. I don't know if this is quite an S tier like pick with these. I think if they also did the base damage, which they had on the first preview, where they were doing like the non-empowered version, then I think that would have been enough. Like I think Shen would have just been blatantly like an S tier pick, but this kind of change I think is just an A tier change. I think he doesn't really jump enough to kind of like be an S tier option. He's just not blindable enough to be enabled in that kind of region. Yorick is going to have 10% more damage taken from his passive on the jungle. Yeah, it's another Yorick change. I think this pick is already incredibly low elo skewed for jungle and is going to continue to be pretty low elo skewed for jungle. Top lane Yorick doesn't really get affected a huge amount by this. Obviously, it's going to be some level of power down, but top lane Yorick I think is already... I mean, top lane Yorick's fine. Like, it's a good... in fact, it's a good pick. Like, top lane Yorick is still one of the better picks you can opt into in the top lane at the moment. It's even seen some competitive play in the LPL, and for, like, the average player, it is a strong option. So, yeah, continue playing Yorick if you play him top lane. I think Yorick jungle, if you are low elo to mid elo, is still fine. In fact, probably even good. And, yeah, the higher up you go, you probably want to start moving towards different champions. This is a nice change. Feast and Consume now may be pinged to show the damage to monsters when off CD. This helps Nunu, helps Shogun slightly. Boots of Swiftness are receiving a much needed 5 movement speed nerf. These boots have definitely been one of the strongest options for a while, and yeah, 5 movement speed is going to meaningfully bring them back in line. Symbiotic Souls no longer have the empowered recall on the non-upgraded version, but now grant 10 out of combat movement speed. This will help. I mean, this is going to just be a nerf, I believe, to the boots, but it will help certain champions which just want to roam more often, rather than just the perma recalling playstyle of like the Cho'Gath mid, where you could just push wave, recall, push wave, recall, and kind of get away with it because of just how much movement speed and how fast the recall was on these boots. So yeah, it's going to meaningfully hurt that kind of playstyle. World of Ages is receiving a very hefty nerf, 50 health loss and 5 ability loss on the base like item, rather than like not even like the stat scaling of the item, is going to meaningfully hit a lot of mages in the mid lane. I'll talk about this at some point, but when I cover the mid lane tier list video. But I think there are a lot of champions which really are going to meaningfully lose a lot of power. And I think a lot of champions you should really watch this patch are like the assassins, the champions which weren't really bound to Roa. Maybe they could go Blackfire Torch. And yeah, I think that will definitely be meaningful for shifting the mid lane meta, so expect to see some level of changes there. I mean, champions which used Roa as like their core item will definitely be weaker for this, and then some champions use it a bit as a crutch, but were already performing decently on Blackfire, champions like Ari, champions like Victor, for example. Tier 3 boot upgrades are going to have their cost reduced from 750 to 500, and further forward it's going to be slightly nerfed because of this. Same for Spurs Slinger's shoes. Swift March is receiving just a direct change to movement speed, is going from 70 to 65, and they no longer grant 4% increased total movement speed, but now grant adaptive force equal to 5% of total movement speed. So watch out for your Hakrims, watch out for your Lydias. Watch out for champions which have the ability to give movement speed for champions, because they will also indirectly benefit from a change like this. Phase Rush will definitely benefit, especially when like this kind of thing exists, and it might be a case of holding off on like upgrading to maybe T2s or T3s, depending on what kind of like whether you win the feats, because this kind of like buff can definitely really be a big shifter in certain champions like power. So yeah, definitely something to be aware of. I think this is a very nice change, and yeah, a lot of champions will really benefit from it. So yeah, watch out for Hakram, watch out for Lilia. Ignite is receiving a top lane skewed buff. I think top lane Ignite is already pretty good in solo queue. In competitive, it's not. It still won't be what you opt into, even with this kind of a buff. Maybe you'll opt into Ignite TP more often on certain champions. But yeah, solo queue, definitely worth trying. I like playing a bit more now. This is sizable damage increase, especially like later on into the game. But early game doesn't really change a huge amount. Obviously, it diverges at 7. So I mean, champions which will run like Cosmic Insight and want to opt into Ignite and just have it up as much as possible, like into like an Aatrox matchup, for example, will benefit here. So yeah, that is just something to be aware of. Champions which already take Ignite, how they are going to benefit from a change like this. Biscuits are receiving a pretty hefty nerf. This is going to nerf like the larger your health pool is going to be like more of a nerf in those instances. The earlier you pop them, the more it's going to be kind of similar numbers to what it used to be. But yeah, these are definitely going to be weaker. I think it's something like 30 HP less in certain, like in a lot of instances, especially when I was like looking at like 1,000 to 1.2k health numbers, like around that kind of area. So yeah, definitely something to be aware of. Probably will start opting into like magical footwear and like approach a bit more if you like run it within those trees. If you run like if you could run other trees, then yeah, you'll probably opt back into those trees. You might not just default on biscuits every time now. And flinching is receiving a change to no longer scale from 6 to 12 and just be 10 flat at all ranks. I already think this rune is pretty good on like a lot of support options, especially into other CC support heavy picks. And yeah, this will continue to be what you kind of like opt into this room for, especially yeah in bot lane where you get having access to the 10 at all ranks is just really really nice. You might take it in top lane into heavy CC top laners as well, where having that 10 armor and magic resist can be really meaningful, especially if they are chain slowing you or have CC in their kit which relies on them to be like land to kind of be effective as options. Bunch of ARAM changes, same with like the rotating game modes. We've got a new game mode called Brawl, I believe it's called, and yeah, a couple of bug fixes. The one which I found quite funny was the Diana one, where you could like flash Q and it would like massively extend the range of Diana Q. It was kind of like a mechanic at this point, but it's kind of sad to see it get like bug fixed. The other one was like the Quinn E one, where this Quinn E does change the direction of a lot of champions' abilities. I don't know if this was like Yone had it worse maybe, but it's interesting to see that they consider this a bug. So like champions like Ambessa, who will change their Q direction if Quinn E's them. I don't know if that is now considered a bug or what they're going to do with that. A bunch of new skins, and yeah, that's like the patch for the moment. It's a pretty small patch, obviously. The other thing I wanted to talk about was how I believe some of these things are going to change for tier list. I think Neferi top I'll end up removing. It was already on the decline in popularity. It's not bad by any means, but it'd probably be dropped down to like a B tier option, and her pick rate is just not really enough to support it. Gwen, however, I do think will drop down to the B tier as well. I won't really recommend her as much for average play. Shen will get the bump up to the A tier, but change is meaningful enough that I think he will fit in pretty solid there. Cassante will probably remain as a high C tier option, and I don't see this change meaningfully moving him. For the jungle, I think Yorick might drop down to the A tier, but he's still performing in like the mid to low elo bracket of play, so he might retain his spot in this in the S tier. I think Neferi will definitely drop down to the A tier, though. I think the changes will meaningfully affect her. I could definitely see Gwen dropping to the B tier, maybe even C tier. The nerfs are very sizable, especially for jungle. She is getting like 3 lots of nerfs here. So yeah, Gwen could definitely be dropped down quite aggressively. I think this champion is losing a lot of clear speed and a lot of trading power. For Morgana, probably gets a bump up to C tier. I still don't think this is enough to really solidify Morgana jungle as a good pick, but more as like a niche counter option if you do want to opt into it. In the case of mid lane, I've put Morgana as like a C tier option. I think she could be bumped up to B tier though. I think she does perform like best in average MMR to low MMR brackets, which is why this is kind of targeted towards. Orianna was a high B tier option. For change, if it's like enough power, it will probably bump her up to the A tier. But like as a low A tier option, it's not a hugely meaningful change by any means. In the case of Annie, I think she jumps all the way to the A tier, maybe even S tier. The changes are big, like it's her first max and the mana cost on W going down, and she's gaining 5 pen on ult, so yeah, that's definitely going to be meaningful. I can see being a high A, low S tier option. in the case of bot lane, I think Ashe will probably get the bump up to the A tier, bump up to either the high end of the A tier or the S tier. Definitely going to benefit from her changes. Kalista's going to stay as a D tier champion. I still won't recommend this pick, and the nerfs will be meaningful this patch. Going into the bot lane, I still believe that Ashe will remain as a D tier pick as a support option. The buffs are to her second max, and you don't get that much level. You're not going to get as many levels when you're playing support. Any support I had here as a pick to watch. I think any support with the buffs could probably jump up to the B tier, maybe even A tier. Like it's meaningful. Like the base damage on her first max ability is going up, which really helps support. In the case of Morgana, probably gets the bump up to the A tier. Leona might get the bump up to the A tier, might just sit behind the B tier. I'll kind of be interested to see how much that really moves her. Shen will remain as an A tier option. I think I might have even overjumped and moved him to the A tier last patch, but will definitely retain his spot as an A tier champion with the buffs going to this patch. And those are my thoughts. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you really enjoy this kind of video. If you've got any feedback, let me know. I'm happy to kind of adjust how I lay things out a bit. But yeah. See you for the next one. Goodbye.